Welcome to Jolene's Book and Writers Talk podcast. Today's episode, we dive into the world of romance and history with an incredibly talented guest. She's the author who has mastered the art of weaving historical charm and irresistible love and suspense stories. Maggie Fitzroy is the captivating storyteller behind the heartwarming and adventurous historical romances that have been enchanting her readers for the past couple of years. With a background as a former journalist and degrees in history and education, Maggie's passion for the past blends seamlessly with her love for romance. Her debut novel, Mercy's Way, is a thrilling Oregon Trail journey. Beacon Beach whisks us away to the charming seaside town in New Jersey during the Gilded Age, and finally his haven set in the 1920s at Miami in Florida. When she's not crafting these delightful tales, Maggie enjoys traveling, swimming, singing in a choir, playing pickleball, and diving into various genres of fiction and nonfiction. Currently residing in North Florida, she brings both her love of history and her imaginative storytelling to every page she writes. Her latest adventure in writing is historical mystery set in 1955 Pennsylvania, and the first female detective hanging her shingle in a small office in the not-so-popular business section of Philadelphia. Storysmith P.I. started out as a journalist, too. The first book in the series, entitled Never on Monday, published last year, in which Story runs into a handsome competitor who ends up showing her the ropes of the PI business, combining their talents to solve her first case. The next book in the series is called Tuesday Means Trouble. This is the story we are talking about today. Grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and get ready to be inspired as we chat with the remarkable Maggie Fitzroy about her journey from journalist to romance author and everything in between. As a side note, just a reminder, please like, share, and comment below. We will be publishing this in a video format and audio format on all the popular channels. If you would like to be a guest on Jolene's Books and Writers Talk, please visit southerndragonpublishing.com and set up your appointment today. We encourage anybody in the book business who would like to join in on the fun. And now, without further ado, please welcome again to our show, Miss Maggie Fitzroy.
I am Maggie Fitzroy, and I am a romance and mystery writer. And I recently published my fifth book, which is what I call romantic mystery, and the second book in a series about a female private investigator in 1955 Philadelphia. She solves crimes with the support of her crush and handsome competitor, Steve Evans. So that's where the romance comes in. My first three books were historical romances, standalones, and this series, each book can be read as a standalone, but I am writing it as a 7-book series called the Storysmith Mystery Series. Her name is Storysmith. Basically, the first book is Never on Monday, and I just recently launched Tuesday Means Trouble. And right now I'm working on Woe is Wednesday, to be followed by Thrill Me Thursday, Friday on Fire, A Saturday Surrender, and Always on Sunday. I call it a romantic mystery because I'm taking the relationship between Story and Steve across the 7 books. In other words, they don't have a happily ever after at the end of book 1. There's a lot of hope, but my goal is to have the reader say, quick, get me book 2 and book 3 and book 4. So I'm having a lot of fun with that.
It's set in 1955, so things moved a little slower back then, I imagine.
Yes, I'm setting it in the 50s because I like to take people back to another time and place and get out of today's chaotic, stressful time. In other words, the 1950s, 1955, it basically was an upbeat time. Things were simpler. And as far as the private investigator goes, it's more of a challenge for Story to be a woman in business, much more of a challenge. She's up against a lot, which says a lot about her character. She has to overcome the fact that most women were just supposed to get married and have kids. And while she's not ruling that out sometime in the future, she wants life. She wants an exciting life. Being in the 50s, I want to get away from cell phones and DNA evidence and, the video surveillance and more boots on the ground, people talking to real people, going places and face to face old-fashioned detective work. I just find that refreshing and fun, and the books are witty. There's humor. I put humor in there, and I just mean them to be fun. I mean, the feedback I've had from readers is they love them. They like it and they want the next one. So that's a lot of fun to write.
Women's lives in the 50s, there was a lot of challenges, especially for single professional women, where they
Hmm.
couldn't have their own bank accounts and they couldn't own property and
Right.
they had permission. Are you going to address those kinds of issues? Uh,
Yes, that's addressed in Never on Monday, that her father has to help her get a bank account. And her older brother, was a private investigator until he, right before the first book, took a job with the FBI as an FBI agent. He got married and took a job with the FBI. It gives her contact with the FBI at the time. Yes, I mean, she's got a lot of challenges. She's got her mother saying, what are you doing? Your best friend from high school is married and has 3 kids already. Story's 26. And she did have a bad experience. She always wanted her own career, and she was a journalist. And she was frustrated that they just gave her the women's stories, like about fashion and that kind of thing. And she wanted to do a more investigative, serious stories. In a short story that I wrote for the First Coast Romance Writers Anthology, she goes undercover with her brother at Christmas and helps him solve a crime. She's a reporter at the time, and her editor lets her go because she can write a travel story about this place in Maine where they're going to investigate a wedding. She falls in love with, being a private investigator, being undercover, solving something serious, helping someone prevent a tragedy in the case of that story in their life. She's up against a lot, but her father does help her set up a bank account. She's just determined to overcome people's ideas of what she should be doing for what she wants to do. Now, she was briefly secretly engaged at one point in her life and it ended badly. I won't reveal what it is. She's leery of marriage. She just wants a life beyond that, and which creates some interesting adventures with Steve, who is single and has basically a reputation as a womanizer. He's had a lot of women in his life. And so puts her also on edge because she's falling in love with him and she doesn't want to be.
the series are 7 days, but are you going to be stretching it over several years, or are you just going to be doing like
Well,
weekly?
it's not one day after another. Never on Monday, she's solving the disappearance of a doctor's wife, and when that concludes, she needs another case. It's the summer of 1955, and so a few weeks later, for Tuesday Means Trouble, she's approached by a young woman who wants her to find out who murdered her mother on an ordinary Tuesday morning when she was grooming her horse in the stables. So that's where Tuesday Means Trouble comes in. Things keep happening. The story takes place over several weeks, and every Tuesday it's something else. And Steve actually says, it's around here, it seems like Tuesday Means Trouble. What was Wednesday is this starts out in Chestnut Hill area of Philadelphia, which is very wealthy. Story, she has a sprained ankle from the conclusion of the Tuesday Means Trouble case. I mean, it ended up being very dangerous. She ends up with a sprained ankle and a lot of bruises. And so she's looking for something simple. She ends up being hired to look for a missing necklace at a party in Chestnut Hill, and she's going undercover as a ditzy tennis player, which is why her ankle is sprained. Although she's never played tennis, she figures she could fake it. But it quickly turns into something way more serious than a missing necklace. Someone is murdered at the party. It's called a Wowie, It's Wednesday party because the guy giving it is very wealthy and he likes to show off his estate. And why not celebrate the middle of the week? Nobody else is. His parties are very prestigious. You get to brag about it if you went to one of his parties. So it's called Wowie, It's Wednesday. But given what happens, Steve says, well, it's more like Woe is Wednesday. So that's where that title comes in. Basically, I'm still in the summer of 1955. Cases are just a few weeks apart. No, it's going to be probably all take place within a year. I've got, the future books in my head, but what I'm planning is probably within the space of a year. And the other reason I like to write historical is because 1955 is always 1955. The technology is going to be dated if you read the book 10 years from now. My first book, Mercy's Way, takes place in 1845 on the Oregon Trail. And I did 6 months of research on the Oregon Trail. Everything about the Oregon Trail is true and accurate as I could make it. The characters are all fictional. But I mean, the Oregon Trail was what it was, and it's going to stay that way. And then my second book was 1886, Cape May, New Jersey, and then 1923, Miami Beach, Florida. I'm in the 50s and I'm having a good time because they have phones like us, not cell phones, but phones, and they have cars. And she drives a fun 1955 T-Bird convertible that is a gift that you find out how she gets it in my short story in the First Coast Romance Writers Anthology. It's called Christmas Peril, Christmas Promise. And in that short story, she gets that T-Bird convertible as a gift. James Bond drove a fun car, and Maxwell Smart and a lot of the detectives on Magnum PI drives a Ferrari. So I wanted her to have something fun. So that's part of it too.
What has helped or hindered you the most when you're writing any book?
Well, what helps me is if I can settle myself down for a block of time, uninterrupted, say 4 hours, and just totally lose myself in the scene that I'm planning to write. And it's so much fun because 4 hours goes by like 4 minutes, and you just can't even believe, like, say I start at noon and finish the scene at 4 p.m. and it feels like no time has gone by. And that makes it easy. You just get into the flow. I think what makes it difficult if there are things in my life that come up that can't get into that flow. That's frustrating. And I know that some writers only have a time, maybe an hour a day or less than that. I mean, I can do that, but if I could just get in and stay in until the scene is finished, I plot my scenes in advance, not in great detail because the fun is in the writing, but I know where I'm going when I start and where I want the characters to end up. That helps a lot if I just have that block of uninterrupted time where I can just literally lose myself in the story and the time.
Do you have any favorite blogs or websites that you like to go to on a regular basis?
I get daily emails from Janice Hardy. She sends out daily newsletters with a great deal of writing advice every day. I like that. I like John Gordon. He wrote The One Truth, Positive Mindset. I read him every day. So some of it is writing and some of it's mindset, and this is hard to keep going. You're alone, and sometimes you don't know if anybody's ever going to read what you're writing, and it's you and the characters. So anything to me that can keep a positive mindset helps me a lot, besides writing advice and marketing advice. That's the hard part. Writing's the easy part. Marketing's the hard part.
Okay, so you don't get lost on social media, I take it.
No, I think I have a pretty good relationship with social media. I need to do more of it, but I try to keep a balance. What I enjoy is the writing. That's the fun part. I'm on writers groups, and maybe I might do a half hour a day, but that's it. I don't get swallowed up in it.
That's good advice. What are the essential characteristics of a hero that you can root for?
They need to be good looking. That can't be it. They need to be strong. They need to be kind. They might have flaws and they might come off as maybe rough, in the beginning, but essentially you need to know as a reader, I need to know pretty quickly that they are a good person and they're a kind person at heart. Even if they're hiding it or maybe annoyed with the heroine or at certain parts of what's going on, but in the end, they need to be kind and they need to be strong. They need to be brave.
Very good.
And people in real life too, and men in real life.
That's a little bit hard.
None of us like mean people. I don't anyway, and I won't read those kind of books or watch those kind of movies.
Who do you trust for objective and constructive criticisms of your work?
My editor, mostly. My editor, Karen Burmeister, who has been with me from the beginning, and she's also a friend who I worked with as a journalist. She and I go back a long way. As journalists, our desks were next to each other, and then sometimes she was assigned editing duties, And then I became editor of a magazine, First Coast Magazine, and she worked for me. So we're very familiar with each other's writing. I can give her the first half of the book that I'm writing and trust that she will tell me the truth. Is this working and what needs to be changed? And that's in the process. So she's the one that I trust the most. I have been in critique groups, but I'm a little leery of critique groups where you're in with people who are beginners and don't really understand the writing craft. Truthfully, I don't really enjoy critiquing other people's work because I want to change it into my voice, and that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And readers, I trust what readers say. If they like it, I know they're being honest, and I like hearing what they like.
Do you read all your reviews?
I let a lot of time go by because some writers don't read them at all. I don't get caught up in it. I was just up in Ocean City, New Jersey last week doing a book signing. I'm lucky because I have a contact at a bookstore there, and because of my books are available in Ingram and bookstores can order them through Ingram like any other book out there. So I just show up and sell books for them by being there for, autographs. It was a really exciting experience for me because I got to meet readers in person. Some of them had read my other books. Most of them just kind of walked up to the bookstore and they were walking in, and I said, "Are you looking for a good beach read?" And then reading the blurb on the back, looking at the cover, reading the blurb on the back, they liked what they saw. And so I liked getting real-time, real person feedback on what they were looking for. One example is a young woman came up to me. I was, telling her about, she's 1955 Private Eye, and telling her a little bit about that. And then I said, by the way, and I was a finalist in the National Excellence in Romance Fiction Award. And her eyes lit up at the award. This was never on Monday. Her eyes lit up when I said romance. And she goes, "It has romance and mystery?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "Sold." So I think that's something very invaluable about having somebody, in the flesh talking to you about what they like, what they're looking for. And in some cases, some readers came up to me and that had bought my books last year at that store and, told me how excited they were about the next one. So,
Good shot in the arm. And
mhm,
it's also good for your marketing to know that you need to
yes,
emphasize the romance as well as the mystery.
exactly. And I thought I'd been doing that, but then as soon as I said the word romance, she's like, "Oh, it has both?" Okay.
Which of your characters are most likely to be an activist and what kind?
Well, since mine are historical, and all my main characters are female, the heroines. And by the way, the books I'm writing now about Story Smith are first person, so it's all through her point of view, which detective novels are first person works really well. I would say, if anything, she's a feminist at heart. That's not what she's devoting her time to, but she's living it, being her own woman and going against the tide of her times in the 50s.
In her 40s, you can see her being in the middle of the 60s protests and
Mm,
that fun stuff.
Probably. Oh, I really hadn't thought that far, but thank you. Yes. Why not?
When was the last time you Googled yourself and what did you find?
Oh, I don't Google myself. But I know if I did, what I would find was I was a journalist for the Times Union, Florida Times Union. I was responsible for writing 4 stories a week and finding those, most of them, 95%, finding the stories on my own, writing them and taking the pictures. A lot of them were travel. I was lucky I got to do once a month travel column. So I got to go fun places. So I would imagine that a lot of those are still out there. I also wrote a lot of feature stories for First Coast Magazine and for some other publications like the Jacksonville Business Journal, the Ponte Vedra Recorder. So I would imagine I'd find a lot of my stories. Hopefully my website, maggiefitzroy.com, would come up first. But I don't Google myself. I try to stay focused on what's good and what I have control over.
Okay, so you haven't looked and see if you're on Wiki.
No.
Traditionally published authors, the publishing company creates a wiki page for them, especially if
Mm-hmm.
they win awards, they'll go ahead and create the page and they assign somebody to update it.
No, I mean, that's why I decided to go indie. My first book, Mercy's Way, I think it was around 2018. The Oregon Trail book. I mean, I went to the Romance Writers of America conference in Orlando, pitched it, and actually was sent a contract by Soulmate Publishing, which was, I don't even know if they still exist. Basically, they got most of the royalties and they got to control the cover. So I just said, no, I want to keep control of my characters, my story, my covers. And then when I was just at the Moonlight and Magnolias conference this past October, I was not going to pitch Tuesday Means Trouble because I'd already indie published Never on Monday, but I thought, well, they're looking for people. They want people to pitch. I'll pitch, see what happens. And I got a lot of interest. It what seemed like strong interest. And I thought about it and I thought, I don't want anybody telling me that I have to change Storysmith or anything about what I'm doing. I know that wouldn't go well. And then they had an author panel at the very end of this conference, and they said basically that indie authors have a hard time if they do go traditional, because basically the way they put it was, you sign a contract with us and our editor says you have to change something, it's not a suggestion. And apparently the indie authors all argue and get nowhere.
That is the harsh reality of life. That is the way
Mhm.
it is. If somebody wants to go to traditional, I say go for it.
I like having the creative freedom.
Well, the last thing I probably wanted to ask you was about the Moonlight and Magnolia Festival conference. What makes that so different from something like that's a writers conference? It's not a
Mhm.
book sale or a book event or book festival
Right.
or conference. So compared that to when you went to one of the romance writers.
I went to RWA when it was in Orlando. I hadn't even joined First Coast Romance Right. I just wanted to see what it was all about. And it was amazing. I mean, it was at Disney World back then, and hundreds, if not a couple thousand writers. And I didn't even know what I was walking into. But I just tried to soak up every session and learn as much as I could. I think the most helpful thing was meeting other writers. Yeah, there weren't readers there. I've actually not been to a conference where there were readers. Now I'm going to Sleuth Fest. Sleuth Fest is for mystery.
Right.
At the end of September, and that's in St. Petersburg, Florida. I think there's supposed to be some readers there, but I don't know. I'll find out. Again, I'm walking into something like totally open and flexible, and whatever I learn, I learn.
Is it Boucheron? Boucheron or Boucheron?
Boucheron, I think that's in Nashville, or it's somewhere in the Midwest, I
But
think.
that's a mystery one, right?
That's a mystery one. Sleuth Fest is Mystery Writers of America and Sisters of Crime. There are several, but I thought St. Petersburg, Florida is drivable, and my son lives a couple miles from the hotel, so I thought, well, I'll see what I can find out.
Well, good.
It'll be a
I
totally
hope
different experience.
take lots of videos and pictures and post them on your social media for all of us who can't go. You may have to do a live on Facebook if you have fun.
Well, I've never done that, but I'll call you for advice.
You guys go, you and Lee and the rest going to Moonlight and Magnolia this year in October.
Leah is again, and I mean, it was so much fun because Glow went and I roomed with Glow. Glow can't go this year, and I had to make a choice financially
Right.
if I was good, because with Moonlight Magnolias, you really need to stay in the hotel, and it can get pretty expensive. The good part about it is the camaraderie and just being with other writers. Got so much out of that emotionally and just, connecting. But I just feel like at this point I need to find out what's going on with mystery writers and maybe, mystery contests. I mean, I don't know as much about that. I'm just going to go with an open mind. Like I said, the fact that I could stay at my son's house helps me save money. Whereas when you go to Moonlight Magnolias, you're somewhere in Atlanta, and you don't want to drive in Atlanta, so you are in that hotel. And it's a very pricey hotel.
Is there any advice, tips, or suggestions you can give for a new writer that I could add to our collection?
I would say my best advice for any new writers is come in with the attitude that you have a lot to learn. It's like Donald Mass says, the super agent Donald Mass says, writing fiction is a complicated art form that takes years to master. There are many, many, many levels to it. As a journalist and a writer of 2 nonfiction books, I will just say that fiction is way harder. Different universe. So just come in with a beginner's mind and soak it all up, and don't expect to be as good as your favorite writer out there who's been writing since the 80s or 90s and has 68 books. Just take it one day at a time and just try to find your own voice, and just every book be better than the book before. and just compare yourself to yourself. But like I said, just expect to have to learn a lot, that when you come in, you probably don't know very much, and be humble about that. And just because you've been reading books for years and years and years, don't think you can sit down and start writing one, because that's what I assumed, and I was quickly proven wrong. Expect that, as hard as writing is, and of course it's very hard, marketing is, everybody says that.
Well, Miss Maggie, I want to thank you very much for being on our podcast.
Thank
And
you, Jolene.
well, that was a pretty good show. I want to thank Maggie Fitzroy for joining us this time and hope you enjoyed it. We are always looking for new guests. You can always go to the southerndragonpublishing.com and schedule a podcast interview, and we'll be happy to set that up for you. So we'll see you next time.